Welcome to Washington in Focus Daily. It is Tuesday, August 18th, 2026. I'm Carlene Johnson, the Center Square, Washington's state government reporter. And in today's episode, an update on the PDC complaint, the Public Disclosure Commission complaint filed against Let's Go Washington and Undivided podcaster Brandi Kruse. I had a conversation this morning, unfortunately only by phone, not video, but I'll share some of what I learned today from Pam Stuart. This is the Sammamish City Councilwoman who filed the PDC complaint, why she believes it is justified, and some pushback, if you will, from Brandi Kruse. Further, we'll share that with you in today's episode. And then We Heart Seattle founder Andrea Suarez is being investigated by the state. Labor and Industries is looking into alleged what they call improper collection or disposal of the drug needles and the used foil and other drug debris that she collects off of the streets of the city of Seattle and in the greenways and in the city parks. Now, you can look at this as perhaps no good deed goes unpunished, but she is pushing back, and we're going to share that with you in today's episode. And then finally, the two candidates vying for position 5 on the Washington State Supreme Court. I chatted with both incumbent Justice Theo Angelis and also with the challenger Dave Larson. Those are the two to advance after the August 4th primary. So you're going to hear from both of them in today's episode, as I had a chance to catch up with them at an event last weekend. All right, yesterday we shared an update on a PDC complaint that was filed against Let's Go Washington back on May the 12th. The update is because the Public Disclosure Commission is moving into its next phase. They held a hearing last week in the case, which is routine after 90 days. If they think that there's potentially any merit to the complaint filed, they move ahead, they hold a hearing, and that's what happened last week. There were some TV stations that ran with it as if it was a new complaint, and that didn't go over very well with Let's Go Washington or Undivided podcast producer Brandi Kruse. And they were concerned, basically, the TV stations that ran with the story didn't even reach out to them for comment. They are at the center of this complaint filed by Pam Stuart. Again, she's a Sammamish City Council member, and she's been a pretty vocal critic of Let's Go Washington's initiative. In fact, we shared in yesterday's episode that she was accused of sort of getting in the way of some folks who wanted to sign petitions for the income tax repeal, I-645. That happened back in late May at a Safeway store in Sammamish. So we talked about that today, but her complaint is basically contending that every time Brandi Kruse on her podcast talks about the Let's Go Washington initiatives, and in this case, we are talking about the parental rights initiative to restore parental rights in education. So the school has to tell you if something's going on with your kid. And the protection of girls in sports, keeping trans identifying athletes out of girls' sports. Those two initiatives Brandi's very passionate about and has spent a lot of time on her show, if you follow her, talking about those. So the complaint from Pam Stuart alleges that there have been at least 150 instances where Brandi has talked about these initiatives on her show, and that should be treated as an in-kind contribution to Let's Go Washington, basically an advertisement for those initiatives. So I didn't get a hold of Pam Stuart yesterday, but she did phone me back this morning. So I've updated my article published yesterday on the site to include some of her comments. But I wanted to share with you a little bit about what she said and a couple of the quotes from our conversation. We'll put this up for you. She said, the main goal here is transparency, right? I think in today's world, it's really important for people to know who's providing services, who's paying for things, so that they understand the information that they're getting and what that source is. Is it truly unbiased? Is it, a personal opinion? Is it a fact? To me, that's really important in today's world. And I think that's what we're all looking for, is just some transparency. So she mentioned that. And then she shared that she's also convinced Brandi Kruse is actively campaigning for Let's Go Washington. And She, she said, I Brandy's way more involved than she should be. She says it isn't like she just had one episode where she talked about an issue. She's participated and been the MC at Let's Go Washington events. She's using her following and her followers in that way. She's pretty actively campaigning for these initiatives, and that seems pretty obvious given the number of times she brings it up. Again, that was in my conversation this morning with Pam Stewart, the Sammamish City Council member who filed the PDC complaint alleging that Let's Go Washington is either funding Brandi's campaign, which both she says they aren't and they contend they aren't. Um, but she also took issue in our conversation with a post that Brandi put up yesterday. Of course, this has been heavily in the news since late last week. And the post from Brandi on X yesterday, we're going to share with you in a moment. Again, she was responding to the PDC investigation and repercussions. She says if they end up finding that her talking about the initiatives amounts to an in-kind contributions, that really is going to open up a Pandora's box here. If this ends up being a successful complaint, that there would be far-reaching impacts for members of the media all across this state.
And if suspicion is enough, the PDC has the power of subpoenas. They can subpoena my records, my personal information, my financials. Based off of what? A hunch? A suspicion? Okay, if you say that suspicion is enough to get news entities to open up their books, well, I suspect that the Seattle Times, since it takes advertising revenue from the Washington Education Association, that advertising revenue is actually being used to pay them for favorable reporting. I suspect it. Bring them in, subpoena them, make the Seattle Times open their books. And we'll do the same thing to every single commercial advertiser working in the news sphere. And it will cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of hours in attorney fees, and it will render the PDC essentially useless. Try me. Try me. I will spend every waking hour I have burying the PDC in absolute bullshit over this. And Pam Stewart and the Washingtonians for Ethical Government, Pam, you are on a razor-thin line of defamation. Razor thin. For one, you take one freaking step over that line of accusing me, again, of doing something that I have not done, taking money I have not accepted, getting handed money behind the scenes, to what? Say men aren't women? Men aren't women, men aren't women, men aren't women, men aren't women. So we will raise holy hell in this state. We will bury every newsroom in PDC complaints, in legal work, if this is the route they choose to go. And I will be tireless in my pursuit of retribution.
So there is that. Pam Stewart said she took offense to that post from Brandi and likened it to a personal threat against her. So much more to come, I'm sure, on that. And there's no idea at this point when this will be resolved. By the way, the PDC indicated to me yesterday there's no timeline for resolution here. And resolution could look a number of different ways. It isn't necessarily going to be a fine if they find any in-kind contribution in favor of the person who filed the complaint. Or they could simply say to Let's Go Washington, okay, you can't do this, or Brandi, you can or can't do this. There could be a number of different courses if, in fact, they find the complaint to have some validity. But I want to remind you that there was a case concerning KVI radio hosts, both John Carlson and Kirby Wilbur, in this 2007 case. And in full disclosure, I worked for KVI at the time. I recall a lot going on when this case went to the state Supreme Court. And it was called, I want to read this, San Juan County versus No New Gas Tax. And this was a complaint that basically said these talk radio hosts are going on and on talking about the No New Gas Tax initiative. They should not be able to do this. They're campaigning for it. And the Supreme Court found that it was legally protected speech for these talk show hosts, ruling that it didn't violate state campaign finance laws, or that disclosures needed to be filed with the Public Disclosure Commission every time they talked about them. So it's almost as if this has already been decided by our state Supreme Court. Pam Stewart said she believes it's a different world now. And granted, the social media influence, nearly 20 years later, and how podcasters are influencing news content that people absorb, it's a whole different landscape. So um, we'll see if the PDC takes that previous Supreme Court ruling into consideration or not, if they consider it to be something entirely different. Now, We Heart Seattle's Andrea Suarez is being investigated by the state. Labor and Industries is looking into alleged improper collection or disposal of the drug needles that she picks up, the used foil, and other debris collected off of sidewalks and out of city parks. Mind you, this is the same drug paraphernalia that Seattle King County Public Health and other public health agencies across the state actually give to drug addicts so that they have clean needles, so that they have clean foil, so that they have tourniquets for their arms, so that they have Narcan should they overdose or need to save another fellow drug addict in an overdose. But nonetheless, the Division of Occupational Safety and Health, OSHA, opened a case against Andrea late last month. And they gave her at the time just 2 days to produce a bunch of safety documents that they wanted. So here was We Heart Seattle's video post on X, which caught our attention.
Somebody has taken the time to report We Heart Seattle for improper handling and collection of hypodermic needles and fentanyl paraphernalia, and the state of Washington has served me paperwork. I am under investigation for improper handling of drug paraphernalia in the city of Seattle. I have to provide accident prevention program, training materials for bloodborne pathogens, training logs, safety meeting minutes. We come out here as volunteers and do a service to the city, and I'm supposed to now produce disciplinary records?
Now, if in fact this is your first, entry into learning what We Heart Seattle does, and Andrea Suarez, the founder of We Heart Seattle, it's basically her and then two part-time employees. Everything else is just volunteers. They have something like 75,000 volunteer hours out there cleaning up more than 2 million pounds of garbage out of our parks and off of sidewalks in the green belts going back to 2020. And they take no money from the state. They're entirely funded off of donations. And they also help people get off the streets and into recovery. And in fact, the two part-time employees that she has now are former drug addicts, also were incarcerated, got out. Now she's employing them to basically help rescue other people off the streets. There's nothing like, the story of a recovered addict, recovered someone out of incarceration, to potentially convince somebody else that it's that their life has value and that it's worth the fight. So she has rejected the the low barrier, no barrier housing first model that has been promoted in this state for quite some time. So here's part of my conversation with Andrea yesterday.
Does this harm the people we're all trying to help when you slow down an agency that's out there on the ground, not just picking up hypodermic needles and paraphernalia of all kinds? I mean, it's not just fentanyl foil, but cookers, used Narcan cartridges, vials of Narcan, tourniquets, used alcohol pad wipes, bloody gauze strips, poop, barf, urine filled bottles that lay strewn all over our shared spaces. And, somehow I'm in trouble because somebody claimed that I improperly picked these up. And that is an egregious overreach. The state should have looked at this as a much bigger lens and went, let's see, one employee, bunch of volunteers, kind of has an activist vibe to the organization. Maybe this isn't a tree we need to bark up. Look, I'm all about safety, proper separation of needles and foil, gloves, pinchers, vests, masks, goggles, whatever anybody wants to wear. Volunteer by definition means by choice. So those folks out there doing this work, do it on their own and we have waivers. But as an employee, I understand we have, labor and industries to report to. I'm not even sure a one employee organization has to do anything. But I certainly don't have disciplinary records on hand for me to file them, or my hepatitis shot protocol, or the woman investigating me said, well, I need to walk around, your office and, your operation. I go, well, that would be the park. And you're more than welcome to come out to the park and step on foil and needles and Narcan and poop with me.
So we don't know who the named individual is who filed this complaint with Labor and Industries. It is publicly available information. We're already seeking that. But Andrea said no matter to her, she's convinced it was not one of her employees or a former volunteer or someone like that. Who knows? But at this point, she doesn't really care. She said every time somebody comes at her, it just makes her stronger. And it oftentimes increases donations to her organization.
We are going into our 7th year come this fall. And we've picked up millions of pounds of trash, hundreds of thousands of pieces of needles and other drug paraphernalia. And thank God we, are safe, and don't have any kind of record where we're running people off into the ER room because they've, stepped on something sharp and dangerous. And I expect everybody to, go to the doctor and sign a waiver that says they've got their proper shots and immunizations if they believe in them and everything else. So but yeah, it's the overreach, like the big government picking on the little one woman operation that has organized 75,000 hours of volunteers. And we look like a multi-million-dollar organization because of what we do, and because we do make a nickel scream, and because we don't have red tape and bureaucracy that slow us down. We're so effective. So I was asked earlier if I think that maybe one of the temporary workers, or, somebody, legitimately turned us in. And I said, not with any bone of my body do I think somebody that's a regular with us. I mean, we have a very small team. That's the whole point. And say, hey guys, is there any issues today? Anything we can improve on with? We did add a couple more people to go get the bloodborne pathogen training for $40. I mean, gosh, I think every single human being walking through the streets of Seattle should probably get a bloodborne pathogen certificate on how to handle, what's out here right now. Narcan cartridges and vials full of medicine to reverse overdoses. And this is the biggest kicker for anybody listening that doesn't know this. Our county Department of Health hands out the foil, the cookers, the tourniquets, the needles, and everything that we're trying to do to clean this up. They are handing it out with nothing inside that kit on where to dispose your used needle or your used foil. It just ends up on the ground like another piece of litter, so I am going to file an L&I claim against a lot of people today in the next 48 hours. Because we need to raise the bar, and there's a lot of people out there picking up needles and foils. And if I'm doing it wrong, maybe everybody else is too. And let's improve the system and make it safer for all.
I did receive a response back from Labor and Industries and Matt Ross. He emailed this to my question about the complaint. We'll put this up. He says any organization using employees to handle used sharps, the needles, is required to follow the same set of basic rules to protect their workers. Generally speaking, they must have documented programs for accident prevention, documented program for preventing exposure to bloodborne pathogens. And Andrea says they all do that. And workers who have access to and use personal protective equipment appropriate to the work. Now, we'll see what comes of all this. Of course, with the hundreds, it's probably thousands of volunteers that have helped her out over the years. There might have been a volunteer that didn't go through the safety protocols required before they went out to help clean up the drugs and the paraphernalia. But again, these are volunteers. So whether or not Andrea would have had to put them through some kind of training before they went out, other than just give them, a quick what's for before they go out. Here's how to be safe. Here's your gloves. Um, that remains to be seen. So where this goes remains to be seen. It's kind of like with the PDC complaint. We're not really sure what sort of enforcement mechanism will be on the other end. There could be some fines levied against We Heart Seattle. We don't know. They could also just say, this is our expectation for how you adjust your protocols internally. All right, now moving on to the final part of today's Washington in Focus episode. I had an opportunity last weekend to meet some of the candidates for Supreme Court here in the state of Washington. There was a Let's Go Washington event held in Redmond, and several of them were in attendance. So I grabbed whoever I could grab and got some interviews. So I want to talk to you about the two candidates running for the position currently held by Justice Theo Angelis. He was sworn in back in April, appointed by Governor Bob Ferguson when the previous judge left that seat early. And that's how it works. But then you have to run, just as if you're a candidate on the ballot, even though you have been appointed and are already serving in that position. So Theo Angelis is running against Dave Larson. And when the primary results came in, of course, they were the top two vote getters. I'm going to read this so I don't mess it up. Theo Angelis had 35.86% of the votes. Dave Larson had 32.16% of the votes. So, again, as I mentioned, Angelis was appointed to that position back in April upon Governor Ferguson, replacing the retiring Justice Barbara Madsen. Before that, he was a litigator with the law firm that Governor Ferguson worked at, K&L Gates. Larson, on the other hand, came pretty close to earning a position back in 2024. He lost a campaign that year to now sitting Justice Sammamish by about 20,000 votes. Sounds like a lot, but out of nearly 3.3 million votes cast, that was a pretty close race. He retired recently as a Federal Way Municipal Court judge. So here is part of my conversation last weekend with Dave Larson.
Well, even calling him the incumbent at this point, because he was appointed, that's one of the problems we have in our system is that we have this resign and appoint, and the people deserve to be able to have a choice. And I believe I am that choice. That oath has to mean something. And I think what's happened in recent years with the Supreme Court, they're more interested in the results than they are in a law. We make the result shape the law instead of the law shaping the result. And I think what I add is that this passion to really breathe life into the Constitution. Like I cited Article 1, Section 1, where all political power is inherent in the people and governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. And the purpose of government is to protect and maintain individual rights. Most people, when I tell them that, they're surprised that's the first provision, but it's something I love. And again, I'm a servant, not a master. I've been that way as an elected official for 20 years. And I continue to want to do that in the Supreme Court to restore confidence in the court. Right now, the court cares about confidence, but only the people they like. And I want everybody to have confidence in the court.
Do you feel that our current state Supreme Court makeup is become activist?
Yes. Well, they have indicated, and again, I know them all. I like them all. I don't have any problem with them. But they've made it very clear, a few of the justices, that it's about social justice. It's about an agenda. And they're not shy about it. They think that that's what their role is, to actually shape public policy. And it's created some of the chaos that we see in our society. We could go into greater detail, but ultimately there's plenty of examples where they've got into the policy arena that's created problems. One example is the Blake decision, where they legalized drugs, essentially legalized drugs. And I think that the different direction, and basically, I just want to be a judge. And I think most people want judges to be judges. They don't want them to be activists for either side. And I think we just need to be pretty insistent in the judiciary to make sure that we know our role, which is to be, the lighthouse from the storm, not a ship lost at sea, and kind of constant in government.
And now Theo Angelis, who again attended the Let's Go Washington event in Redmond last weekend, I said, hey, you're at a mostly center right event. Why'd you decide to come? Why was this important to you?
I genuinely believe our judiciary is nonpartisan, should be nonpartisan, and I want to make sure that all voices in Washington are heard. I think it's important for me to talk to everyone, whether they're nationally inclined to agree with me or not. I think our judges and our justices should be always careful to speak to everyone in our state. That's why we have an elected judiciary in Washington. It's important for us to talk to everyone. And so that's why I wanted to be here today. Well, I take real steps to try to ensure that I have no bias in my decision making. So I've talked about it a lot, but one thing I do is I create an actual list of potential biases that I might have. And I find that when I list them, they fall away and I can decide the case based on the merits, based on the facts of the case and the law as I understand it. So it's been a huge honor for me to serve the people of Washington in position 5. I truly believe that a great and independent judiciary is fundamental to ordered liberty in our country. And so, just if you're looking for someone who's trying to be independent, who wants to decide cases as they should be decided based only on the law and the facts, I hope you'll support me. And that's what I'd like all the voters to know.
So Dave Larson and Theo Angelis, just two of the candidates for one of the 5 Supreme Court races on your ballot this November. We're going to be profiling some of the other candidates that I had an opportunity to interview last weekend in the coming days this week on episodes of Washington in Focus Daily. That's it for today, for this Tuesday. Enjoy the sunshine. I hope to see you again on Wednesday.